Hello and welcome back to An Old Man Watches. Today I will be talking about Clint Eastwood's 1985 western Pale Rider. The film is set in the Old West, as most westerns tend to be, a place called Carbon Valley in California, where mining baron Coy LaHood, there's a villain name if I ever heard one, is waging a war of intimidation against independent prospectors and their families. After LaHood's men attack the mining camp and kill her dog, the teenage daughter of one of the prospectors prays for deliverance. Shortly afterward, wouldn't you know it, Clint Eastwood rides into the valley. Or rather, Preacher does, as that's what his character is called in this film. As is the way of such things, Preacher almost immediately starts thwarting LaHood's reign of terror and beating up his goons. The mining baron escalates, bringing in a corrupt marshal named Stockburn, who rides with a half-dozen gunslingers at his back. Preacher suddenly seems to think better of resistance, but the prospectors prove resolved to defend their claims to the end. With or without Preacher at their side, they decide to reject LaHood's ultimatum. Will the mysterious stranger stand by them or ride away as suddenly as he came? Well, I mean, one of those options wouldn't make much of a climax, would it? So after the critically and commercially disastrous Heaven's Gate in 1980, mainstream Hollywood gave westerns a wide berth. Perhaps only someone like Clint Eastwood, who had built his entire early career on the genre, could have organised funding for this picture. In the event, Pale Rider was both a critical and a financial success. It was praised for Eastwood's performance as both leading actor and director, and Roger Ebert gave it his highest rating of 4 stars. Audiences also liked the film, which went on to be one of the most successful westerns of the decade, grossing more than 5 times its production budget. Not quite everyone loved it, though. A few critics did express reservations about the film, and while I'm just some guy who likes stories, I also think that it has some weaknesses. So let's look at what does and does not work in this movie. So first, I need to acknowledge the film's positives. Pale Rider looks great. Eastwood and his production team show off the natural beauty of the movie's locations, which were mostly in Idaho, to great effect. The sets and costumes are also high quality, and the film overall oozes an authentic look and feel. It's sun-drenched when it needs to be, but also grimy and muddy when appropriate. The on-screen performances are also solid. Eastwood himself isn't doing anything we haven't seen him do multiple times before. More on that theme later. But he does it as well as ever. No one else in the film has anywhere near his star status or name recognition, but they play their roles with verve and ability. It's easy to sympathise with the tenacious but outmatched prospectors as they struggle to protect their livelihoods. So look and feel of the film is strong. All the surface elements are definitely neatly lined up and capably executed. Alas, when you start to dig beneath that surface, the film starts to look a little bit thin. I think the biggest cause of this is that it lacks any real sense of tension. Eastwood's Preacher character simply never seems outmatched, not even really challenged. Everything just comes a bit too easy for him. Facing 4-on-1 odds in a brawl, he wins easily. When threatened by a 7-foot giant, played by Richard Kiel, aka Jaws from James Bond, Preacher doesn't even break a sweat. Every woman loves him for reasons that frankly aren't very clear, particularly since in some cases he's old enough to be their grandfather, and every man wants to be him. To me, Preacher feels completely uncharged and untouchable, and that means that the movie lacks any real sense of tension. Oh, he's facing off against a dozen desperados? Meh. He's going to win. And sure, the protagonist almost always does win in a movie, but I'd argue that it's part of the movie maker's job to try and make us forget that in the moment and buy into the danger of the situation. And I think Pale Rider fails to clear that hurdle, and that it's a weaker film for it. If you'll pardon the pun, it's a pale copy of earlier, better westerns. And it certainly has some strong echoes to those films, particularly the Sergio Leone movies on which Eastwood began his march to stardom, and older works such as Shane. The film makes no pretense of being anything other than the latest iteration in an extremely familiar scenario. A near nameless drifter with a mysterious past who comes into town and for his own somewhat murky reasons gets involved in the community's potentially lethal troubles, generally ending with him riding away afterward, a big pile of bodies in his wake. In fact, if you took the script of Shane, crossed out Farmer and wrote Prospector, you'd be at least 80% of the way to having this movie written. They even both have a scene where the main character deliberately prevents their main ally from participating in the final confrontation. The other film that this one echoes, though more faintly, thank goodness, is Eastwood's own High Plains Drifter. Eastwood himself is on record as saying that the preacher in Pale Rider is a ghostly revenant taking vengeance on his murderers from beyond the grave, though, other than taking its title from a biblical verse, the film itself contains no explicit suggestion of the supernatural. This whole he's a ghostly revenant thing is entirely unwritten in the text. It's just something that, I guess, Eastwood is telling us is happening in the background. Ultimately, like I found, trying to rate, give it a star rating to Pale Rider would be quite a tricky conundrum. It's got its good qualities, and there's little that's outright bad about it. I just found it a little bit bland and empty. Didn't quite do it for me. But your mileage may vary. Next time, 5 years before he blitzed the box office with The Incredibles, Brad Bird made his directorial debut in 1999's The Iron Giant, a fantastic animated adventure that sadly failed to find commercial success to match its critical acclaim. But that's next time. Until then, thanks for watching this video, and I hope you enjoyed it.